Hello and welcome to another Sacred Wisdom podcast with me, Rebecca Parks, my co-host Chris Clifford, and our very special guest today, Emrys. Now, Emrys was born in Turkey to a family of classical musicians and later moved to California. Starting as a teenager, he supported himself as a musician playing rock music, later on playing a variety of different styles. Emrys also does sound healing sessions and has a degree in literature, registered nursing, and motorcycle repair and maintenance, very eclectic, as well as being certified in shadow work. Emrys joined Connecting Consciousness as a member in 2015 and later volunteered as the Northern California and CC Turkey coordinator. Currently, he is hosting the Performing Arts Film Music Dance Group and co-hosting the Philosopher's Stone Group on CC's community platform in Mighty Networks. Over to Chris.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Hello, Emrys, and a very warm welcome to you and to all of our viewers. So we have many exciting topics to talk about today with Emrys. We're going to talk about sound and vibration, and we have a very special ending today. Emrys is going to perform a sound bath for everyone. We thought we would start with the topic of honoring emotions, which for our CC members, that's our current monthly spiritual topic, is all about honoring one's emotions, whatever your emotion is. And so Becky mentioned that Emrys is certified in shadow work, which is often something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But knowing how to do inner work or shadow work is very, very important. And so that's probably well, I will mention a couple of years ago, Emrys did a shadow work course for our CC coordinators, and it was absolutely amazing. So again, Emrys, thank you for being with us. And I'm going to hand over to you. And if you could maybe start with what is shadow work and why is it important, that would be wonderful.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Chris and Rebecca, for inviting me for this podcast. I'm really honored. And to start with, what we will be talking about today is not meant to be a diagnosis or treatment, and it's for informational purposes only. If you have been through trauma, please seek proper help. That's what I was gonna start with, and also, depending on our background, how we were raised, and our level of awareness, we have different perspectives. So when I speak from my perspective, and there isn't just one right or wrong. So if whatever we're talking about works for you, please use it. And if it doesn't work for you, please just let it go, and maybe it'll come back another time and it'll make sense. So it's all good. So basically, shadow work is just making the unconscious conscious. Whatever's in your unconscious we're not aware of, it's hidden somewhere inside of you. Bring it to the light. That's simply what it is. So why is it important? It is important because if things are hidden somewhere, if we have been through trauma, we can't, that's like part of the personality is hiding somewhere. We can't really be authentic. So if we bring everything to light, then we know ourselves better, and then we can be more authentic. And authentic means what's inside and what's outside is matching. It's the same thing, basically. So in a nutshell, that's what shadow work is.
Thank you, Emrys. And so, could you and or Becky help our viewers to kind of better understand. So if there's things that are stuck, because oftentimes we don't know that something's stuck until some kind of trigger comes up. And so that trigger might be, that we're extra emotional about something that, may not be, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal because there's something that's stuck in there. Or, we get really angry about something, like excessively for us angry, or, we're crying about something. Or for me, at times, there's something that comes up and it bothers me to the extent that I know it's a trigger and I'm supposed to learn something, or I'm supposed to figure something out, or I'm supposed to release something. So those are just a couple of examples that I have. But do you have more examples of, like, how can people know if there's something that's arising for them to heal? And then I guess the second part of that question is, then what do you do?
Yeah, a trigger is basically an emotional flashback. So something bothered us at some point in the past, and then it is usually recorded on a cellular level. People think that everything is recorded in the brain, but that is not really true. So we go through a trauma, and the other thing is there are big traumas. Well, it is decided by the person how big a trauma is. For one person, something not so important may be a huge deal for another person. So basically, when we go through a trauma, it is written in a cellular level, and we may not know it mentally. Also, what happens is when we go through a trauma, if we can't deal with the trauma at that moment, we postpone it to the future when we can deal with it. But the body has its mechanisms to deal with it at the moment, so we can survive the trauma and we can move on with our lives. So one of those is dissociation. So basically something terrible happens to you, you cannot deal with it, you just completely erase it from your consciousness, and you act like it never happened to you. So that is dissociation. Fragmentation is another one. When that happens, you leave a part of you in the past at that moment, and your other portion of you continues with your life. And when you triggered, you're supposed to go back if you can't deal with it at this point, because we become adults and now we can deal with some of those problems. We go back, but the problem is then we have all these fractured self. So a person can have 20, 50, 100 cells. So people say that you have multiple personality disorder, but we all have it. We all have multiple personality disorders. I've never seen an exception to this. So it's very common. So we're not one person, we're many persons. And yeah, so
I'd just like to dive in here. One of the things that people often call it soul retrieval, where you're going back, but actually it's not really part of the soul that's fragmented off. It's actually part of the personality, part of the ego, it's more of a one's mind, isn't it? But it's a real energy, and this actually can also, and we're getting into proper some very interesting conversations here, but that energy has a life and mind of itself, and can work as a poltergeist as well. I know of situations where that can happen. It doesn't always, but it can do. But part of shamanic healing, that when I learnt that and learnt different aspects to it, one of them was called the soul retrieval, or it's going back into your past, your history, to try and connect with an aspect of you that you kind of left that's stuck in the past. And it's incredibly valuable work, going back and integrating with that, and sort of welcoming that back in, because that can have happened at any time throughout one's history. And as you say, it's more common than we think.
Well, the term soul retrieval is actually really interesting because what can happen is we have our physical body and we have our soul, and normally they occupy the same space. And normally, if you're a healthy person and you're not dissociated, you live in harmony with your soul. And whenever we get impressions from the outside world, it goes through our physical self and the soul feels it. But if you go through a trauma, you are dissociated, you can do one of two things. You can either move your soul out of your body, so now you're walking, your physical body is walking here and your soul is walking next to you, and you're not really feeling things the way a healthy person would be feeling them. So like there could be people who wake up in the morning, they've gone through trauma the day before or in the past, and they have some dreams, and then in the morning they wake up dissociated and now they cannot get out of the bed. That is because the animating part, that's like the soul, is not animating your body because you're completely dissociated, you're separated. Another thing that can happen is you went through trauma and you're in the same body, but now you want to protect yourself. So you eat a ton of food and you're overweight just to protect your soul, which you keep at the center of your body and padded with a lot of fat outside. So that's another one. You make the outside world, you make it hard for the outside world to damage you, harm you. So at the end, it serves you both ways. So, I mean, everything, even the addictions, there's always something that's serving you. If you find out how it's serving you and transform it where you're more in harmony, then you can deal with it. But if you didn't figure out how the dysfunction serves you, you couldn't figure it out. So dysfunctions are always serving us in one way or another. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
I'm kind of all over the place, but
It's easily done when we're in conversation about topics. But everything you've mentioned here are the more extreme types. We have on a day-to-day level all kinds of things, like little things can trigger people, and it doesn't need to be like a huge deal, but it's like a constant thing. So different people have, as you say, different topics, and it's such a deeply personal thing. So one should never judge another person. That's a saying, isn't it? Unless you've walked a mile in their shoes, you shouldn't judge them, because it's impossible to really put yourself in someone else's position to know all the surrounding factors that create an environment where somebody feels a certain way about something. We all have our own ways of how we feel about things. So that's something that's coming up in the topic about emotions, and also will come up in the future with when it comes to judgment and forgiveness, because it's such a deeply personal thing.
absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to Emrys's comment about if you can figure out how it serves you. So, yes, we have been talking about kind of bigger issues here, but I feel like that's such an important question, and it can be used with small things or bigger things. Like, I found, like, if I get in the habit of asking, how does this serve me? Whether it's like an illness that I'm experiencing or some kind of strong emotion or something, like if I ask that question, then a lot of times there's something that will come to me that whether it's like, okay, I need better self-care for myself, or I need to do some forgiveness, or whatever it is, like that's a really good, I think very practical. I was going to say easy, but it's not easy because you never know what's going to come up that you need to do. But asking, how can this serve me? I think like brings it to your awareness, and then you can start figuring out, okay, how do I heal or let go of or do whatever it is that that I need to do.
Yeah, I'll give an example to that. For example, I met this person who had intense social anxiety, and she is like super, super shy. She can't really talk to people. She's so afraid if she's gonna say something wrong or people are not gonna like her and all that stuff. And then she started drinking. All of a sudden, she drinks some alcohol and she can interact with people normally. It's like alcohol was really serving her get over her anxiety. It was really funny thing, but of course, after a while, the effects of alcohol started showing. But by that time, she actually figured out how to interact with people, and she cut alcohol off, and she can still interact with people, which was a really interesting, thing. So it was serving her in a
It's a good
positive way.
example of not being judgmental too, Emrys, that things that we can look at and think, oh, that's a bad thing, right? You just don't know what another person's going through and how something may serve them a different way than it serves you.
Yeah. So basically, when we do shadow work, um, we put the person in the theta state, which is between awake and sleep, so that we can have access to the subconscious. But for that to happen, the person today has to really feel secure. If there's no security, if they don't feel, safe, they're not going to be able to go back and resolve this issue. Because what happens is when you go through trauma, your body kind of puts a hard stop there. You cannot deal with this at the moment, and this is a life and death situation. So do not come back and deal with this unless you feel really, ready to do this. So we never push someone to do shadow work if they're not ready to do so. So everybody has their own time, and but the thing is, when it's the right time, it's really good to have the knowledge so that you can actually do the work and bring the subconscious to the conscious, to conscious.
So how does the shadow work really help to heal someone? How does bringing something out from the subconscious into the light, out from the dark into the light, how does it help somebody heal?
First, maybe we should define what healing is. So healing is actually something that we're not happy with, right? And then we want to change it to something that we're happy with, from unhappy to happy. So for example, we are terribly afraid of spiders, and we want to feel basically the opposite of it. We want to heal ourselves so that we're not afraid of spiders. Or if you got into a fight and you broke your nose, the opposite of that is a healthy nose, unbroken nose. So it's healing is the actually experiencing the opposite of what you don't like. So what was your question?
It's how does bringing something out from the subconscious into the conscious help to heal someone? And I'm looking at it really from a point of view as in helping them overcome what they see as an apparent hurdle, perhaps in this context, to help them with their spiritual development. So in a way, it's making them more aware of themselves as a person, as a spiritual being. So often bringing things out from the subconscious into the conscious is another key to helping make that enable a person become more self-aware. Does that make sense?
Yes. So when a trauma happens in the past, it is imprinted in our cells. And when we do, shadow work, we're basically imagining things. But at that level, in the theta state, the body really doesn't know the difference between what happened in the past and what you're doing right now. So if you're healing it, even in your imagination, it takes it as something actually happened and healed. It takes it as something physically that happened and healed you, even though you're just doing a session and you're imagining it. So we do a session where the person decides if they're ready for it and if they feel safe. And then actually the first thing to do before we get into shadow work is to create a safe space. It is very, very important to create this. So again, the person who is facilitating it is not doing it for the person. We're just facilitating it. Actually, the whomever is the person that we're working with does everything. We're just showing them the way, which I really like. So nothing is pushed on the person, and it really helps for them to feel safe because nothing is pushed onto them. And so first we create a safe space in the imagination. So they can imagine a place and they can put whatever they want in there. They can put flowers, they can put people that they trust, they love, they can put their pets in there. They can imagine a beautiful house where they feel comfortable. It could be in a forest, it could be on top of a cloud, and they feel safe there. And then we usually almost always put, a pure water, source of water, and which will help to purify that person. I did a Zoom meeting before about water. Water is an amazing substance. It's so amazing that when humanity realizes what water really is, they're gonna just completely freak out, or just gonna be totally amazed. This liquid thing is, yeah, it's just fantastic thing. So we always incorporate that into shadow work. So yeah, once they feel safe as an adult self, they go back into the trauma. And if they don't remember anything, it doesn't really matter, because when they're in the theta state, we're looking for feeling sensations. It's just like flavors, just little details, little flavors. It really helps if we do this when a person is triggered, because then everything is activated and you're just ready to dive into the work. So you can do it, when you're feeling good, but it doesn't work as good. So we're looking for, like, a person might say, oh, well, I'm feeling something in my chest. Maybe there's a little bit tightness, and we can ask what color it is. We can ask what texture it is. Every little detail is important because it takes us to the moment of trauma with these little, sensations, little flavors. So it will eventually take it back to, there could be like several traumas related to the first trauma. So we can go back like 3 years, and then we can go back in time 5 years, 10 years. Eventually there will be one that started it all. And that's the one that's really important that we want to work with, because once we deal with that, it'll cancel all the ones happened in the future. Because if you don't heal the trauma, this is related to what you asked, Becky. If you had a trauma, that trauma wants to heal. It's gonna want to come back to you time and time again. It's kind of like a spiral, The trauma happened here, and we're going into adulthood, and when we turn back, we always come back to that point. It wants to be healed. Even with ancestral traumas, whatever we heal within ourselves, we actually heal the traumas of our parents and grandparents and all that stuff too. It's the spiral.
That's so fascinating. I sort of know this, but my big question is, why does a trauma want to heal? What is it that's pushing that? And part of this is, it's very spiritual, isn't it? Part of this is the energy behind it. There's an energy for order, And it's a sort of balance between chaos and order all the time, isn't it? Where we're trying to create an order within ourselves moving forwards, but chaos happens and disorder. So does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. So we have energy centers in our bodies. So like different modalities talk about it differently. So like in the Eastern tradition, which is popular nowadays, the chakra points are energy points, right? And chakra points, there are 7 of them, but in human design, I don't know if you're familiar with human design. In human design, there are 9 energy centers. So it's like the head, the crown, and the third eye, and the throat, and the heart, and the solar plexus, and all that stuff. So these energy centers serve us, but if we are able to use all energy centers and connect them together, then we really become like fully functional. We become a superhuman, basically. You know, people say, you know, when we have 12 what do you call
Bands
it?
of DNA.
DNA, strands of DNA. We will become a superhuman, and we're only using like a double helix now. It's in that sense, it's parallel to it. So when we go through a trauma, the energy centers, they can't work with each other because they're stuck, because they're blocked. So we're not really actually are you know, functioning in our full potential. So it really makes us kind of see small pieces of the reality, but we can't see the big picture because our body is not functioning the way it's supposed to function. But ultimately, what's happening is, let's say you had a trauma, and this had something to do with logic. So you have this like logical dilemma in your head. Well, somebody threw a rock in the air, for example, and that rock never came down. Like, how could that be? You're just like kind of like stuck there. It just logically, it doesn't make sense. So the logical things happen in the head. So this person is, you know, trying to solve something logical, but then something else happens that has to do with emotions. So when you were growing up, they paid more attention to your sibling, and you didn't get much attention, and you're just have this like broken feeling inside of yourself. That has to do with your, you know, emotional center. So if we understand these energy centers, different energy centers, and each one has different needs and each one has different function, we can be the master of our body and then figure out how it all are supposed to work. And it's kind of like, imagine a house, you know, big house, and there are the maids, and there's the wine cellar, there's the chauffeur, and there's the gardener, but there's no master. Since the master is absent, nobody's telling people, you know, how to do, what to do it, and everybody's kind of like doing whatever you know, whatever they want, and it's kind of like chaos. Our body is kind of like that. Once we understand it, and once the energy points are opened, and it's all like energy is flowing, then we can fully take responsibility for who we are as a person. Until that time, we're actually many people, and once that starts happening, and we have like a center that grounds us, then we're becoming more one person. So imagine that your body is like many different persons, and then there's this center starts forming, and this is like a solid, like masterfully created space, and it expands, and now it's your entire body is part of that. Then you're like coherent, then you're harmonious, then you can see things, then you can interact with the outside in a much better way. So that's what it does, and that's when you're in your fully authentic, which is the most important thing. That's how I describe it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And it actually, that reminds me of, I've mentioned it in a previous podcast that I'm listening to an amazing guy called Neil Douglas Klotz, and he is an works with languages, and he's learned Hebrew and Aramaic and Arabic, and he has gone back and looked back into the time of Jesus and really looked in depth at the Lord's Prayer, what we call the Lord's Prayer now, which is the prayer that Jesus used to say. And it's really beautiful. Like the first two lines translate to, "Oh, Father, Mother," oh, birthing Father, Mother, something to do with shining all your light. And the second line is to do with cleaning the heart, like cleaning the area of the heart, and it's almost like the area around the heart, making it clear so that you can receive the light coming in and you can shine the light going out. It's kind of cleaning the windows of your heart so that you can connect really fully more with who and what you are and with source. So when we've got like a cloudy heart, it's all the emotions cluttering it up, so we can't think clearly, we can't be clearly, we can't express ourselves clearly. And I'm fine even through the course of a day. It's very easy for me, and I've had an example of that today, to have something where you get thrown a curveball, and I react kind of not calmly and not just I react emotionally. And then it takes time to sort of regroup and get oneself back. But I find that I can do that quite quickly when I just think of this, because we are so dynamic as human beings, as living creatures. We're so dynamic. We sort of change all the time, and we can express ourselves. And another thing which showed me this was once I went and had my aurograph taken, and I decided to do an experiment with myself. So I turned up there. This was a long time ago, and I had young children, and I remember rushing to sort out childcare and rushing to drive down there to make my appointment in time. By the time I got there, I was quite stressed. And my aurograph was amazing. It really showed that. It was all different colours with a splodge of red here, and it was all over the place. I went for a healing session, and I went back to the aurograph and I had it done again. And this was just an hour later. And it was all sort of calm purples and whites. It was gorgeous. It was all like lavender and white. And, to all intents and purposes, it looked like the aurograph had been taken of two completely different people. But it was just me at two different times of the day, um, in two different modes of feeling and expressing myself. And so while we're sort of talking here about overcoming big hurdles and overcoming big traumas and doing big shadow work on ourselves, we also, through the course of every day, go through a range of emotions, a range of things happening to us, little trigger points, and being able to get ourselves, correct ourselves in short periods of time. And one can do that just through careful breath work or sitting somewhere quietly and grounding, all different ways. And in fact, Chris, when we're talking about emotions and chi and this topic, don't we give away ways of raising our vibration, and in terms of being able to connect with ourselves and just have some downtime to ground and center ourselves so that we can, it's almost like starting life again from the next moment, from the next point, isn't it? Overcoming an emotional hurdle and then just back on track to get on with the rest of the day.
Absolutely. It's interesting. So we have some of that, a variety of different topics, because they're all so related. So in the raising vibration topic, and also I think in spirituality, because the whole idea about that Emrys touched on, and you touched on, Becky, about whether you want to call it spiritual cleansing or whatever it is. I kind of think of it, very simply about how do I ground myself? How do I bring myself, back to my heart center? And you're right, Becky, we've talked a lot about the really kind of the big things and big traumas, which absolutely can get stuck. And it's very important to, find ways to work through them. But then also throughout the day, I find sometimes it's the little things that, these series of little things come. And then if you're not very aware of those things and aware, like I did too, like you over the years, I figured out I can very quickly kind of reground myself if I'm aware. If I'm just go, 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 and then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, okay, now I need to take a breath and calm down and use some of the tools in my toolkit." So yeah, absolutely. Um, One thing I wanted to circle back to real quick, Emrys, I love that you said that trauma wants to heal itself, and that how trauma comes back over and over again, presumably to give us an opportunity to heal it. So I wanted to throw out the question because it kind of feels like that's kind of open out there for our viewers right now. So I wanted to throw out to you and to Becky, and I'll put in a little piece. So when that happens, I feel like awareness is key, like understanding like this is a repeating pattern in my life, and then stepping back to reflect on that. So I'll go back to, you could ask the question, how does this serve me? What do I need to do? What do I need to learn from it? But Emrys or Becky, anything to add to that? Any practical tips for our viewers on if there's repeating traumas, what to do?
Well, first, I want to say something about coping mechanism versus healing our traumas. They are two different things, and people often confuse them. So, you're going through something during the day, and you just don't want to deal with healing yourself at the moment. You don't have the time for that. You just want to move on, and you use this coping mechanism, and maybe you take a few deep breaths and put yourself together and then go back with your meeting or whatever you're doing. That's different than healing. So coping mechanisms don't address the real issue. And also, you were saying, Becky, shadow work is not really just the big traumas. It could be little traumas. The way we deal with it is actually the same. It could be something really small. The idea behind is something happens and you get triggered. We need to just take a break and then feel the emotion fully. So this requires no judgment whatsoever. So we just sit with the feeling fully, unconditionally. There's no like time limit. Even if your time is limited, just at the time, just try to be with it without judging it, without using your brain. Oh, that happened. The person said that to me, and I had to defend myself, and somebody was watching. Oh my God. None of that. Just cut off the brain, the thinking part. Just totally. Just be with the emotion. And the body is made in such a way that if you unconditionally stay with the emotion, it will resolve. I guarantee this to you. But you're just not afraid of where you're gonna go, how it's gonna happen. Just trust the process, and it will transform. So we're transforming like what we call is a negative sensation into a positive sensation. But I'm gonna disagree with this term that this is a vibration. I really don't like the term low vibration, high vibration, because that really does injustice to vibration. So it is not a vibration, it's not a bad thing. When we say it's low and when it's high, it's kind of like, oh, well, low vibrations are bad, high vibrations are good, and we should be switching from low vibration to high vibration. It's about the harmony, it's not about the vibration. It's kind of like, I'll speak in musical terms. Edgar Cayce said, if you know music, you pretty much know everything. And I totally agree with him. Like everything that I've learned, I can relate it to music. and music really explains it, really well. It's kind of like low vibration, high vibration. This is going to sound absurd to people who don't really understand music, but well, if you just, I don't even want to say it in that way. For example, in music, a violin is a high vibration. A double bass is a low vibration. You can't say that a violin is better than a double bass just because one is high vibration, one is low vibration. Doesn't really work that way. How can I explain this?
Emrys, I absolutely love this explanation. I totally agree with you. And I played, I don't know, I'm like you, I'm musical. I was trained as a musician, and I played the flute and the piccolo in an orchestra. And I loved playing the flute because I love the sound of the flute, and I really hated the piccolo. But I learned how to play it, and unfortunately, I played it well. And it would be that the top noise on top of everything else that's playing, that like literally nothing outpierces a piccolo, and that's what I hate. So if you make a mistake, you really hear it. But yeah, I would much rather listen to a beautiful melody on a cello or a double bass or even a tuba than listen to a piccolo that's ear-splittingly high vibration because technically it is. So I agree with what you're saying. There's no real good or bad. One's just got a longer wavelength than the other.
So, but when we get triggered, we go into this space we called, oh, we're depressed, we're feeling bad, it's a negative emotion, this and that. But that is a doorway to healing your trauma or, going back and resolving an issue, which makes you a much better person. How can that be a low vibration? So this is a low vibration when people think that they're going to be stuck in there, or they've been stuck in there for so many years and they couldn't figure out a way to get out of it. Then it becomes, this term comes, well, it's low vibration. But if you know how to deal with it, if you know how to transform it from, that to that, it's a beautiful thing. So there's no such thing as a low vibration or a high vibration, even with society. So, because of the political terms going on, stuff going on out there are people who believe this, there are people who believe that. And well, this group thinks this group is low vibration, this group thinks this group is low vibration, whatever. The thing is, it's the harmony between the two groups. So if this group finds out what this group is fearful of and accommodate that, and this group finds out what this group is fearful of and accommodate that, then it's harmony. You can live together and you're all one. So there's always a solution. So there's no like this polarity thing. So I was talking to Chris about this at another time, but this is called and consciousness, A and D. It's not E and D, but A and D. So we live in a polarity world. So there's always contrast, hot and cold and good and bad and you name it, healthy, unhealthy. So, and people have different perspectives. So when something happens, people always just take a side. Okay, well, I believe that this is the correct thing, this is the wrong thing to do. Well, instead of picking a side, try to hold both perspectives within yourself. So recently, I was telling some people that, well, a drug that they really thought was really useful, I was telling them maybe it wasn't as non-toxic as they might think, but because of the groups, their collective groups' beliefs, they picked a side, and it's when you pick a side, it's really hard to get out of that side and see the whole picture. So once I figured this out, I realized that holding both perspectives within me, just expanding myself. A little perspective is this big, and there are all these perspectives, this big, this big, this big. Just expand yourself and hold all perspectives within you, and don't necessarily pick one. And then depending on the situation, you can use the wisdom of this group and this group, this perspective, this perspective. It's a really beautiful thing. And then there's no more division anymore. But it takes practice. And this is what Buddha was talking about when he was talking about the middle path. but actually it was translated from his language to English, and it came out as a middle path, but it's actually end consciousness. So you're holding all perspectives within you without choosing a side. So
Emrys, thank you for bringing this up. We had, Emrys had mentioned this during one of our last coordinator drop-in sessions, and I had said this would be a great podcast topic. And I have a picture on my wall. You probably can't see it back there, but it's a quote from Rumi, who's one of my favorites. And hopefully I'll get this right, but it says, beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And I find that so fascinating, because it's like exactly what you're talking about, Emrys. And we do get very attached to our particular views. And it absolutely does take practice to be like, I just think it's kind of, I hate this term, human nature, but our brains go to, but what about this and what about that and whatever. And I'm trying to train myself to catch myself and be like, okay, well, this is a different perspective. And then exactly what you said, like, okay, there is space for all of the different perspectives and opportunity for that. But I love that idea. There's like a field beyond wrongdoing and right doing, right? It's kind of that 0 point, that space where anything is possible.
Absolutely. And also, this is a sort of talk about closed minds and open minds. If you have a closed mind and you feel like you've got everything figured out and sorted out, and there's absolutely no room for maneuver, no room for questioning a topic and just saying, could there be another point of view? When someone is very fixed like that, it and rigid, it leads to a deep unhappiness when you're encountering other people with different points of view. But if you can have an open mind and be willing to challenge your preconceived ideas and concepts, and be willing to take on board different points of view to see how they resonate with you, see how you feel about it, then that is a starting point for self-growth, for self-development, I would say.
see, if you first started to learn music, if you put two notes that are really close together, for example, F and F sharp, you try to play them together, they sound awful. It's just, you can't make music that way. But if you take an F on this octave and go one octave down and play F sharp together, now you can, they sound really interesting. They sound really beautiful. So for the beginner musician, it's like, well, you never do that. But as you experience music, then there's all these things that are completely possible, but you really need to have the awareness and the mastery of it. Life is like that. All kinds of things are possible. So it's really not good to just pick a side and say, oh, I believe in this and this is the right thing and all the other people are wrong. It's just doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's how wars happen, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. So in the interest of time, and to make sure that we have time for the sound bath at the end, Emrys, you've kind of helped us shift into a discussion about sound. And I wanted to share, before we started the podcast, we were talking about sound, and you were saying sound and shadow work is very connected. And you had mentioned Edgar Cayce. I love him too. And he said the medicine of the future will be in music and sound, which, I'll be honest, I don't know 100% what that means, but it's I think it sounds very fascinating. So do you have any comments on that, Emrys? And then shortly we can kind of transition into the sound balance.
Sure. When we do sound healing, it's kind of like a big space and there's lots of instruments, and all these instruments, it's like many varieties, have different frequencies, which corresponds to different energy centers of the body. And I like to start from the base and then start going to the crown chakra. But when these vibrations come, and during the sound healing, people lay down on the floor. They usually bring a mat and a blanket and a little pillow, and they are basically, with their eyes closed. That is the theta state. They're half awake and half sleep, and that's when we do the shadow work. So sound bath is done the same way, or sound healing is done the same way. So when all these vibrations start, all these gateways that are closed, that are shut down, they're vibrating and they're starting to open a little bit. And then, some people may start laughing all of a sudden, like hysterically, or some people completely freak out. Some people fall asleep, all kinds of different things happen. So, people who think they had a fantastic childhood may realize that, during the sound bath, and they're being triggered, and all these strange things are happening because, age 6 or 7, anything before that, we don't really remember mentally. It's not really recorded in our memory, and it's all cellular. So all these things can be triggered during sound bath. We even tried with a friend who is an acupuncturist. We tried to do sound bath and acupuncture at the same time, which was really interesting because certain parts on our body correspond to certain energy points. So if we can match the vibration of the instruments to the acupuncture points to a certain energy center, they can really start opening up. The key is just let whatever your body wants to do, just let it happen, because body itself is ultimately so much more intelligent and smarter than our thinking is, or our programming is, and it'll do the work naturally. Shadow work is totally natural. Like, for example, one day you may be driving and you see this beautiful scenery. All of a sudden, you just have to stop and just burst into tears and just cry and cry and cry. That's shadow work. It's built into us. This is not something unnatural that we're doing. Maybe you felt vulnerable when you first came to Earth. You came out of the, your mother's womb, and maybe you felt like this emotion which was traumatic to you. And when you were driving and you see this beautiful scenery, maybe you went back to that point and you felt this intense vulnerability and you cried and cried and cried, and now you cleared that. That's what shadow work is, really, which I'm sure happens to everybody if we let ourselves let it happen. We're supposed to be tough and we're not supposed to not cry and forget all that stuff. So let the body do whatever it needs to do, and it's all natural and it's really good.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the sound bath.
Okay. Well, since you aren't laying down, people aren't laying down, this is going to be kind of not going to be just like a regular sound bath, but yeah, I can just do how I do it, and you can observe it.
Or what we can do, I mean, Chris, can we turn our picture off? Will that work? Will the recording keep going? And we can just lie down or just rest, close our eyes.
That's
And
okay. You can watch too,
our
because
listeners will.
yeah, sometimes people come to sound bath and they do the sound bath, they lay down, and once they wake up, oh, I really wanted to know how you made that sound. That's really interesting too. So some people, like, one eye is closed, one eye is open. That happens a lot because they're so curious. So either way is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say we can go back and listen to it. This is the benefit of doing it at the end of the podcast too. And any of our viewers who want to return back to the podcast and listen to Sound Bath again, that's why we put it at the end too. So, yeah. So Emrys's tip is, of course, if you're not driving or doing anything that would preclude this, is to lay down and listen to the sound bath.
Yeah, there's sound baths now everywhere around the world. More and more people are doing it. You can search it wherever you live and find a sound bath and experience it in person. And especially if they're doing it in a church or a cathedral with an amazing acoustic, and it really, really works.
Sounds wonderful. Well, Emrys, thank you. Thank you for all the conversation, and thank you for gifting us with a sound bath. And I just wanted to share, when we first started talking about the sound bath, Emrys called it creating a painting with sound, which I found really beautiful. So, Emrys, over
Already?
to you.
Let's see how this works. Okay, that's basically how it is, but it goes for long. We do it at least an hour or so.
Oh, that was wonderful. Do you know, I loved every bit of it. And the bits at the end, the last jangly bits that you did, it was like my skin was like going all, is it goosebumpy? It just felt so lovely. It's like the energy was all around. That was, oh, that was lovely.
Everybody loves the koshi chimes. They're really good.
That was
And when we do the
very
sound bath,
beautiful.
people are laying on the ground. We walk around them. So sometimes we go close to their ears or go around them, or yeah, it's kind of like personalized. And this isn't something that you can practice before, so it depends on whoever's there, depending on their energy. It's completely different every time. So whatever we feel, you know, also the events of the day, it just makes us do different things, different sounds.
So it's very holistic. It's very much an intuitive
Hmm.
process.
Yes.
Emrys, that's just absolutely beautiful. You know, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It touches upon really some of the key topics. So you know, well, as far as I'm concerned, the topics I find absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much.
You're very
And
welcome. Thank you.
hopefully you'll come back and join us again sometime soon.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Emrys. And yes, that music was just beautiful. What a wonderful way to. And just one last comment for our viewers, for CC members. If you want to learn more about sound and music, Emrys does lead the Performing Arts Film Music and Dance Group on Mighty Networks, and he offers several different events that I've attended many of them, and they're all very amazing. So we'll include a link to that. So if you're interested, please check out more. And thank you for being with us here today. And thank you again, Emrys.
You're welcome. One last thing. People, learn to like a certain type of music, but the music of this planet, it's probably the most amazing thing. I doubt that there's this much good music in other planets. So it's kind of like having like one perspective. If you go to different cultures in the world and experience their music, I mean, there's so much amazing stuff. So on the Mighty Networks page that I host, I try to post music from all different kinds of worlds, and it's just such good stuff. And I spend so much time finding really good music. You can just come there and experience it, and you wouldn't need to do the work. Just enjoy. So
Thank you, Emrys. That's a great point. And thank you again for being with us today.
you're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.